Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. We continue our retrospective of Neil Gaiman's masterpiece, The Sandman. Last time on the last episode, Morpheus, aka Dream of the Endless, was imprisoned for 80 years, but was finally able to escape and wreak swift revenge on his captors. After going through literal and figurative hell to reclaim his tools of power, he set about re-establishing his realm and finding wayward beings that had left the dreaming in his absence. In the process, he took back several nightmares, freed Lita Hall and her unborn child from a dream prison, not that she recognizes that that's what he did, and we learned just how much of a crappy boyfriend he was over the years. Personally, I'm still shipping him and Hob Gadling. In the meantime, though, let's dig into the next 20 issues of The Sandman and see where we go from here. Issue 21 begins the next major storyline, Season of Mists. We're introduced to Destiny, the only member of the Endless who was not originally created for the series. Destiny is yet another horror host, this time for the book Weird Mystery Tales. And man, when you stop and look at this stuff, DC had a lot of horror titles back in the day. There are a few I still haven't mentioned yet. Destiny is the oldest of the siblings and tends to lack much personality, consumed entirely by being the keeper of his book. Said book contains everything. To be accurate, written in it is the sum knowledge of everything that has or will ever happen. It is the encyclopedia of everything, every event that has ever occurred. And as you can imagine, quite a lot had to be cut when they released an abridged version. As is customary for this series, Destiny comes across the Grey Ladies, aka the Witches 3, aka the Furies, who warn him of several events that will soon transpire, but that they all have their start in his domain. Reading ahead in his book, he sees what he has to do. Summon a family meeting of the Endless. The Endless are soon called, Death being asked to wear fancier clothes by Destiny because he's a bit of a buzzkill. Morpheus's finest vestments have him dressed as a pirate.
Ha 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 ha! Your costume is ridiculous!
Destiny does not seem to raise any objections to Desire dressed in lingerie or Despair appearing naked. They discuss that there is a member of the Endless who won't be coming, though details about why aren't given yet. However, we then meet the youngest of the Endless, whose speech is garbled, a rainbow, and the one who seems the least focused of the group, which makes sense given who she is, Delirium. There are a few pages on them that describe these members of the Endless, giving some info about their domains and characteristics, but the most interesting tidbit is that Delirium was not always Delirium. Once upon a time, she was Delight, but something happened that changed her into what she is now. We never learn exactly what that was, but it also shows how the nature of the universe can change if these elements of existence can be transformed in such a manner. Anyway, the meeting. I suppose you must be wondering why I called you all here. To destroy Superman. No, he explains about his encounter with the Fates and the book telling him that something important was going to happen because of this meeting. Thus, he called the meeting and is like, well, get started on figuring that out, people. They mostly bicker, Morpheus being grumpy that he was called away for a meeting without purpose, and staying only because Death asks him to. Despair is the one that surprises me the most. We don't see a lot of her throughout the series, but here she seems to more embody remorse more than anything else, saying that they didn't used to always fight, particularly missing their brother who isn't with them. Desire brings the conversation around to Morpheus's craptastic track record with relationships. How's your love life? Killed any girlfriends recently? Or sentenced any more of them to hell?
He's out of line, but he's right.
Morpheus walks away to cool off, Death following after him. He rants at her a bit that he loved Nada, but that she defied him, despite him giving her due warning. And Death calls him out and says, yeah, Desire's right. Sentencing someone to endless torment because she turned him down, especially since she was correct that it's very messy and bad for one of the Endless to marry a human, is total bullcrap and a crappy thing to do. And Morpheus realizes, yeah, maybe they're right and this needs to be fixed. A very consistent thing about Morpheus's character is that he trusts Death implicitly and totally. He may argue a little bit or disagree, but she is the second oldest of them and contains far more wisdom than him. Unfortunately, that also means he has to go back to hell, and that little speech in A Hope in Hell isn't going to save him a second time. He heads out to prepare. Don't do anything stupid. I am afraid it is too late for that admonition. It's kind of my new name, Dumbass of the Endless. When she returns to the meeting, Destiny declares it's over because him returning to hell was the entire point, bringing us to issue 22. Morpheus summons all of the inhabitants of the Dreaming to inform them of his quest, and that it might mean he's not returning. It's been 2 years since he was freed from Burgess's cage, and during that time, the Dreaming went south, and he wants to make sure that doesn't happen again if he doesn't return. Thing is, given how pissed off he left the devil last time, he's probably not just gonna hand Nada over. The Endless are powerful, but they're not all powerful, especially when on someone else's turf. Hell, he will admit later that Lucifer is actually more powerful than him. Which, it doesn't seem right, but I can see them being a little more on equal footing, especially inside of hell. If he's destroyed, then another aspect of Dream will fill my shoes. It's kind of what I meant last time. Dream is endless, but the personality we're seeing, this particular shape of him can be killed or imprisoned or harmed. In fact, we'll later learn that the despair we've seen is not the first of her kind. So yeah, we're going to hell. Hey, Morpheus, some dude in power armor dropped off a big shotgun, said to take it with his compliments. Well, actually, he said rip and tear over and over, but I think I got the gist of his meaning. Matthew says that at least he's got the element of surprise, but nope. That would not be honorable, Matthew.
I was not a sportsman.
Morpheus, sorry to armchair quarterback here, but he's the devil. Who gives a rat's ass if it's honorable? But no, he sent a messenger ahead to alert Lucifer that he's coming. Said messenger is Cain, and since he's the biblical Cain, he's actually got direct protection from God himself, who I remind you is very real in the DC universe, referred to as the Presence, despite the fact that all these other gods and pantheons are just as real. Comics are wild, kids, and thus they cannot physically harm him. Though they do scare the crap out of him after he announces that Morpheus is coming, whether they let him in or not. Because this could mean Morpheus' death, he goes on a little tour of people to meet with and say goodbye to, which includes Lita and her son, and she is not happy to see him. She's doing better now since the last time we saw her, though she hasn't come up with a name for the baby yet. Once again, he sucks at this. There is much you do not understand, Hippolyta Hall. Perhaps one day we will talk further. For now, I merely wanted to see the boy.
You're kind of an idiot, aren't you?
He leaves with this. By the by, his name is Daniel. There's something goofy to me about the fact that someone as extra and overdramatic as Morpheus uses the phrase, by the by. But yeah, Morpheus doesn't bother to ever sit down and talk with Lita, and I can see you've been really busy since you saw her, what with the nothing that we saw for several issues from you at the end of the last part. Anyway, his last stop is Hob Gadling, visiting him in his dreams with a bottle of really good dream wine to inform him that he might miss their next meeting. Hob makes a toast that gives us our title drop. To absent friends, lost loves, old gods, and the season of mists. And may each and every one of us always give the devil his due. Yeah, I repeat that line to myself whenever I have to think about one more day. Lucifer rants to a terrified Cain about how less powerful demons keep trying to usurp him, but he will only admit one being to be his superior. God, of course. And he doesn't talk to him anymore. Well, you know, there's nothing stopping you from extending the olive branch, dude. You never know. Don't let pride get in the way of reconciliation. Still, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, eh, little brother killer? Certainly, Lord Lucifer. Whatever you say, Lord Lucifer. We didn't say it. Milton said it. And he was blind. You saying blind people can't rule hell? He sends Cain on his way and then makes a proclamation to all the demons and damned souls of hell, informing them of Morpheus' upcoming visit, and that said visit has crystallized something that he's been thinking about for a while. After Cain returns to the Dreaming, Morpheus suits up to begin his assault on hell itself. Not the weirdest Diablo armor set I've ever seen, but there you go. Anyway, in issue 23, he arrives in Hell, finding the doors open for him. He enters and finds waiting for him...
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
No demons, no soldiers, no damned legions, no hell spawns, no wicked beasts, no things that go bump in the night, no specters, no penitent masses, no crawling putrid things. Nothing. Even Nada is gone from her cell. Hell is empty. And while not played up for it, I'd like to think that that's the last big horror-related concept for the Sandman book, because I think one of the most terrifying ideas is to arrive at Hell and find it vacant. But the answer to what happened is not terrifying. Worrying, yes, but not terrifying. Lucifer meets up with him and explains it. He quits. The devil has handed in his resignation. While he finishes all the things he needs to do to close up shop, dealing with stragglers who aren't leaving, for instance, he explains what's going on. After 10 billion years, he's tired. Originally, when all this started, he thought he was rebelling against God, but now he's starting to wonder if this was just always God's plan. If he hadn't rebelled, another would have. He's never going to be allowed to go home again, and all this time, mortals have blamed him for their own sins, when all he did was enact punishments that he was expected to deliver. Claiming that he owned their souls now, when no one can own a soul. They just refuse to live up to how they're the crappy ones. How long was he expected to deal with them all over a rebellion he doesn't even care about anymore? And now, after Morpheus announced he was coming, it gave him the impetus to finally close Hell and call it off. He's decided that this is the ultimate freedom. No more fighting, no more responsibilities. That one gets Morpheus confused, given how devoted he is to his. He's gonna go off and enjoy retirement. Lay on a beach somewhere, or learn to play the piano. I mean, he's already mastered the fiddle. He's got to expand his musical repertoire. As for the denizens of Hell, he sent them off. To Limbo, to other dimensions, back to Earth, and that includes Nada. He also recalls that he once promised to destroy Morpheus, and perhaps his final gift to Morpheus will. The key to Hell, giving ownership of the realm to the Lord of Dreams, to do with as he pleases. This consequently, and as pointed out in the Hellblazer review a few episodes back, is why the Lucifer in that story can't be the same one here. Lucifer never takes back the throne in Sandman or in his spin-off series in the early 2000s. No real mention is made of the other two of the trio of demons ruling Hell having an objection to this. Oh sure, we'll see Azazel soon enough, but it seems like the series is kind of retconning how powerful Lucifer is to make this easier. Seems like Azazel and Beelzebub would object to getting kicked out of Hell otherwise is all. Anyway, the abdication of the throne and closing of Hell is naturally going to send some ripples throughout... well, everything. As I said, all religions are correct in the DC universe, so we begin with Odin of Norse mythology learning what happened and deciding to do something about it. First, he heads to the cave where Loki is imprisoned with poison dripping onto his face and comes to recruit him. Why have you come here, glad of war? To gloat at my misfortune? To pass the time? No, Loki Skywalker. Oh, great. First Rey and now Loki? Who isn't a Skywalker at this point? Odin wants possession of Hell. His logic is that with Ragnarok eventually approaching, they could have a place to retreat to and survive the end of them. And we'll soon see that he's not the only god with designs for Hell. Morpheus returns to the Dreaming and is overwhelmed by this. He went to Hell prepared to go to war to reclaim Nada, but now is back without her and in possession of the most prime piece of real estate from one side of existence to the other. As other forces begin preparing envoys to send to him, Dream contacts Death to ask for advice. But she's a little preoccupied. It seems that Dawn of the Dead was right.
When there's no more room in Hell, the dead will walk the earth.
So yeah, she has no idea what he should do, and her job just got 1,000 times harder because a lot of dead people aren't staying dead. Damn it all, Lucifer, if you had just waited another year, Danny Chase could have survived. Naturally, this whole thing also gets the attention of Heaven, which dispatches two angels, Duma, Angel of Silence, and Remiel, who is set over those who rise, not to make any offers, but rather act as observers of what's to come. In Limbo, Azazel rallies the demons to a new plan. They'll take back Hell by making an offer Morpheus can't refuse. Nada. He brings Corinzon, the demon who originally had gotten his helmet, along for the ride. Oh, and since we're on this biblical kick, there's another inhabitant of the Dreaming I should probably mention, even though she doesn't do much. Eve, The biblical one, of course, though her appearance shifts anytime we see her. A heavy-set old woman to just an old woman, and then a young woman, etc. Believe it or not, she was also a horror host! Eve of the Eat an Apple from the Tree of Knowledge Eve. That Eve was a horror host! She and Destiny switched books they were hosting even. Where did this idea come from? Who approved it? Comic books are frickin' weird, people! Oh, and Matthew lives in her cave, apparently a reference to how Eve had a raven in her hosting duties named Edgar Allan. Anyway, the envoys from various pantheons arrive. Odin, Thor, and Loki, Egyptian gods Anubis and Bast, the Shinto god Susanoo no Mikoto, the demons, a representative of Lord Kilderkin, a manifestation of order, the opposite number Shivering Gemmy, representing chaos, the two angels, and soon afterwards, in issue 26, brother and sister Cluracan and Nuala of the fairies. They're all offered hospitality from Morpheus and rooms to stay the night. But let's back up for a moment to issue 25. Like with the story of Hob Gadling, for reasons I don't quite understand, we interrupt the main narrative to something unrelated. It's not as disconnected from the plot like that issue was, but it's still weird, focusing in a bit what's happening with the dead returning on Earth, but it has no impact on the overall story. It's a ghost story about a child named Charles Rowland who's stuck in a boarding school over Christmas as his father is in Kuwait, and dead students and the dead headmaster all show up to take over the place and torture and eventually kill him. He joins up with another ghostly child, and while he's supposed to go with Death, he refuses to leave without his friend. They just run off to do their own thing, and Death is too busy with everything else going on to worry about it. Leading into some spin-off books and material known as the Dead Boy Detectives. It's good stuff, it's just weird that it's here. Maybe Moarte will talk about this one in more detail, but let's get back to the bigger plot. So all these players have gathered to feast, with Thor making an ass of himself, and make their own appeals to Morpheus. Who should get Hell? To the Fae, they want Hell to remain closed due to a deal they had made with them a long time ago, forcing them to sacrifice 9 of their number every 7 years. They're also offering Nuala as a servant to sweeten the deal because fairies are kind of dumb assholes. I mean, for crying out loud, he can conjure up beings whenever he wants. He doesn't need servants offered to him. I'd have given him, like, a gift card to a salon so he can style his hair. Or socks. When you get older, you really appreciate getting socks as a gift. Each of the representatives meets with him privately to make their offer. Odin explains his desire to have a retreat from Ragnarok, and his offer includes some DC continuity. He created a little pocket universe simulation of Ragnarok, which the Justice Society of America is currently engaged in and forever trapped. At the time, the comics presented it as the real thing. Contained there is Wesley Dodds, the Golden Age Sandman, whom Odin claims still has a fraction of his soul from the whole being imprisoned for 80 years in a glass ball thing. Kind of ironic given Dodd's state at the time. Don't worry though, that'll all sort itself out later in DC continuity in the JSA book that came later, but that's a retrospective for another day. Chaos offers nothing, just a threat that there will be war if they don't get it, though later Chaos's representative will admit this was just her doing it for giggles and they have no such intentions. Still, he gets a balloon out of the deal. He got something that he was not expecting. That's how you make an interesting offer. Order offers collected dream essence they've been stealing for years for their own purposes, but Morpheus rejects that out of hand since he could have taken it at any time. Still, Order isn't a dick and says they'll plead their case from a reasonable perspective the next day. Susanoo no Mikoto says that Morpheus should just name his price and they'll give it. The Shinto gods wanting to expand their own influence as they've been assimilating other cultures' pantheons into their own, usually through symbolic avatars and altars that one wouldn't normally expect, citing King Kong, Marilyn Monroe, and Lady Liberty as now being part of them. Bast offers information, that she knows where the 7th member of the Endless, the one who left and wasn't at the meeting that started all this, is, and she can tell him that. And finally Azazel, offering not only Nada back to him, but Corazon, presenting him as a sacrifice that he can torture forever should he desire after what happened with his helmet. And really, Corazon is more there to sweeten the deal. Azazel makes it clear that he intends to consume Nada's soul and destroy anything that remains of her if he doesn't get Hell. So I guess we know whose offer shot up to the top. And honestly, it looks like the best offer on the table to me. The others are either threats or little scraps of things that he could be potentially interested in. The concern about the Fae is certainly valid, but as we saw, death is being overwhelmed due to this situation, and it can't sustain itself. Hell kinda needs to be restored unless an alternate solution can be found to the ghosts and zombies. Giving hell to the demons at least means there isn't a massive upheaval that screws over more people than it helps. Still, that brings us to issue 27 and the ultimate decision. We actually see that there are other representatives present, just not really vying to win it. Like Merlin here. They all want it. I don't. I never thought that disposing of the unwanted could be so hard. Hell, Batman could have told you that.
Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
He speaks to the two observing angels and comments that he's leaning towards the Fae because he feels hell serves no good purpose, but the angels soon get an incoming message from the big giant head, aka God. The message states that there has to be a hell, a place for demons and for the damned, that hell serves as heaven's reflection and shadow, defining each other. Thus, he has made the decision for Morpheus. Hell will be reopened under new management. Remiel and Duma, much to Remiel's horror. Duma, being the angel of silence, says nothing and just kind of accepts it with some tears, but Remiel rants and raves about how unfair and awful this is, that he never rebelled against God, but is tempted to do so now, since this will mean that he'll never be allowed back into heaven. Although that just seems like a dick move on God's part. Remiel and Duma can't just come visit once a month for a status report or something? Morpheus really has no authority over God, and, well, I suppose you could argue being the creator of everything and all, he's got a better claim on hell than the Lord of Dreams, so Morpheus surrenders the key to them. He says as much to the gathered representatives, Remiel even saying that the war between heaven and hell is over, with hell now under direct control of heaven to oversee its operations. Azazel is pissed, probably because it means that he won't have any power or authority in the new hell structure, promising Morpheus that he'll devour Nada slowly for this, but that's where the other shoe drops. Morpheus explains that he extended his hospitality and protection to everyone who came, which includes Nada and Corazon, and he will not see them hurt. Azazel says to come and get them then, renouncing his hospitality. And that, Azazel, is why you are no longer a Lord of Hell, because you do stupid things like that. As I commented earlier, starting a beef with the lord of someone else's realm on their own turf is a really bad idea, and Morpheus demonstrates that. Not only does he easily travel inside of Azazel's void to retrieve both Corazon and Nada, but after Azazel thinks he's trapped him inside of himself, it's revealed that nope, Azazel is his prisoner, inside a little glass orb just as he had been. This is my home, Azazel, my place of power. This is the heart of the dreaming. Reality here conforms to my wishes. It is what I wish it to be. No more, no less. And you will make one hell of a lava lamp. Oh, it's even better. He just shoves Azazel inside a chest alongside other junk and closes it. This demonstration makes it clear to the other representatives that challenging him on this decision would be bad, so they say their farewells. Morpheus comments to the departing demons, who are all getting in line to return to hell, that he'll leave Azazel in the bottle to think about what he did, and maybe let him out eventually when his manners improve. Odin, Thor, and Loki leave, though Loki seems to act strangely, declaring that what's happening is wrong. This brings us to the epilogue, issue 28. As demons return to hell and Remiel laments his and Duma's new situation, Morpheus finally is able to talk to Nada. He apologizes to her for what she went through, and naturally an "I'm sorry, I was wrong" is really not enough to make up for 10,000 years in hell. After slapping him and ranting at him, he briefly considers retaliating against such an act in his domain, but then again, his pride and dickishness is what got them into this situation to begin with, so he simply admits he was wrong, and there's nothing else he can say. She accepts that, and even despite all this, they still love each other. But it's clear they can't be together. She doesn't want to be the queen of the dreaming any more than he wants to abdicate his responsibilities, so they have to come up with another solution for her. That solution is revealed at the end. She's being given the chance to reincarnate on Earth as a new baby, a new life to replace the one that she lost 10,000 years ago. Unfortunately, it's all going to come flooding back to her when Morpheus drunk dials her at 3 a.m. in a few years, wanting to get back together after he goes through a painful breakup. Turns out Loki switched places with Susanoo no Mikoto, Thor and Odin grabbing the Shinto god to take his place, but Morpheus knows Loki did this. Because of the extension of his hospitality, Morpheus is going to let Loki go free, replaced with a dream image of him in the cave, while also freeing the poor god put there, but Morpheus wants something in return. And this seemingly innocuous little afterthought in the story is going to have a massive impact down the road. As for the fairies, turns out the offer of Nuala as a servant wasn't just for keeping Hell open. She's being given to Morpheus regardless. And Morpheus can't really reject a gift from the Queen of the Fairies, despite Nuala's own feelings. Nuala, having not known that ahead of time, can't go back without pissing off Queen Titania as well, so she has to stay. Though Morpheus says she needs to remove the glamour that keeps her looking beautiful and not disheveled, as we soon see. I don't know why he cares about that. A lot of stuff in dreams are merely illusions anyway, so what does it matter what she looks like? Lucifer, for his part, is waiting for his spin-off to start up by hanging out on a beach in Australia. He meets a dude who talks about how his life hasn't been great as of late, but he still loves a god that can produce such gorgeous sunsets. After he leaves, Lucifer has to admit to God, okay, the sunsets are pretty, dude, good job there. And back in Hell, Remiel decides that they can reform the purpose of Hell, make it a place of redemption instead of punishment. Problem is, he doesn't want to stop tormenting people. He thinks that torturing them will make them better people, and they'll thank him for it. And, no, it doesn't work like that. It, in fact, makes it so much worse when demons are torturing you endlessly, supposedly to improve you. They've basically turned Hell into a saw trap. And so Destiny literally closes the book on this part of the Sandman, having technically gotten all this rolling. Season of Mists is a great storyline, exploring some fascinating ideas, expanding on the mythos of the series, while also giving some resolution and expansion of Morpheus' character. Some of the stuff in it really needed some more room to expand, and was done so in miniseries down the road, while the main intrigue and plot proceeded. Just good stuff. And we follow that up with 3 standalone issues exploring more of Morpheus' history, beginning with Thermidor in issue 29. As Morpheus had told Hob Gadling, he came across Joanna Constantine again when she did a job for him, and this is the story of that. In 1794, Morpheus comes to her to do a task that he can't accomplish on his own because it concerns family of his. Morpheus has a son, the Orpheus of legend, and his head is still alive even after so many centuries. Somehow the head was stolen and brought to France, where Constantine has to retrieve it in the midst of the French Revolution. With Orpheus' help, she succeeds, and the head brought to the island of Naxos to be watched over by a family of caretakers. And consequently, the head of Orpheus is going to play a big part in things to come. The Sandman plays the long game for a lot of these elements, setting things up for payoff later, or for spin-offs. Issue number 30, August, is mostly a philosophical discussion about the nature of rulers, fears, gods, and boundaries. It's the story of Augustus Caesar pretending to be a beggar in the Roman marketplace as he talks to a little person actor who's helping him with the disguise about why he does the things he does. The actor, Lysias, doesn't know why he does what he does, but in the end, the Roman Empire would eventually fall due to Augustus's choices, which may have been an attempt at revenge against his great-uncle, Julius Caesar, for raping him when he was 16. The Sandman, a rich, imaginative fantasy epic, full of awful people doing really awful things throughout history. Next up is issue 31, 3 Septembers and a January, also known as How Long It'll Take for Me to Get Back on Schedule. It is 1859, and this is the story of Joshua Abraham Norton, aka Norton I, Emperor of the United States. In case you've never heard of him before, he was a real person in San Francisco in the mid-1800s who declared himself Emperor of the country. And while at first his proclamation that he was now the Emperor was printed as a joke, people decided to go along with it. Sure, he held no actual political power, but he was a local celebrity who started issuing his own currency that was accepted in a few locations, was friends with many, and he would make frequent proclamations and statements about the world and to world leaders. They tried to arrest him once, but there was a bunch of local outrage against this, pointing out that he had harmed no one, stolen from no one, and had done nothing to hurt the country, which is more than can be said of most monarchs. And it's kind of a reminder that kings and emperors and the like only have power because people allow them to have power. No one had to indulge him in his proclamations and declarations of being the emperor, but they were happy to have him as such, and he wasn't an asshole about it as far as I can tell. And thus we have the Sandman issue, which tells a fictionalized, fantastical explanation for what happened with him. Despair summons Morpheus as Norton, distraught after several failed business dealings, seems close to killing himself. Despair has a challenge for Morpheus. Norton has fallen into Despair's realm, and she wants to prove that dreams cannot redeem him. Desire and Delirium are with Despair on this. Well, Delirium is sort of with her on this. She keeps being distracted by fishes that transform into fireworks and sing Ave Maria, but she's there in spirit at least. And Morpheus, coaxed into this challenge after Despair brings up their missing brother, decides to indulge them. In Norton's dreams, he bemoans that America is supposed to be a land of opportunities, but instead it's a land of chaos and confusion, lacking a king. And thus Morpheus gives him something to dream about. The dream of being a king. Norton is inspired and becomes the Emperor, who has lunch with Mark Twain, inspiring him to write a story about a frog that will make people laugh. The Emperor admits that people laugh at him sometimes, but it doesn't matter. He's still the Emperor. Delirium points out that Norton is mad and should be under her domain then, but that's not quite it. His madness keeps him sane, and Morpheus says he's not the only one where that's the case. Desire tries to tempt Norton with women and money, but Norton refuses any sort of temptation or deal along those lines. He wants for nothing. He is the Emperor, and this is his city, his country, and he is treated well. He is content to be what he is. What more than that could any man desire? Well, Queen Victoria for one. The real-life Emperor Norton sent letters to Queen Victoria suggesting the two of them get married to strengthen the bonds between England and the USA. A lot of the statements from the others kind of bring back what Morpheus had said at the end of The Doll's House, that those three members of the Endless see mortals as their playthings, claiming Norton is theirs, while Morpheus sees mortals as deserving their respect and that they exist in service to them. In any case, Desire frustratingly declares that they'll get back at Morpheus for this, make him spill family blood, and get the kindly ones down on his head, setting up the events of the Doll's House, and more foreshadowing for the future. And thus, after Norton dies of a heart attack on the streets, Despair irritatedly declaring that Morpheus won, that Norton never gave in to despair, and death takes the first Emperor of America to what lay beyond. This leads us into the next longer storyline from the book, A Game of You, and I am very sorry to say I don't really like it all that much. It's not a favorite among others either, but apparently is Neil Gaiman's favorite. Now, I do understand why many people love it, and especially an important character we'll talk about in a bit, but it just does not resonate with me for a few reasons. The big one is that, much like the Element Woman issue, or issue number 25 with the Dead Boy Detectives, Morpheus is not really the main character here. He shows up, yes, and will help resolve the situation, but he really has nothing to do with what's going on. And at least number 25 was connected to the larger plot. A Game of You is the larger plot. And unfortunately, I don't find the execution that interesting, and I don't really know what I'm supposed to take away from it emotionally. Well, other than screw awful families who will dead name a trans woman on her gravestone, but that's for the final part. And some of the backstory for this storyline, an explanation of a big part of the conclusion, will not be told in the Sandman itself, but in a prequel comic released in 2013, 17 years after the main Sandman comic was over. It's otherwise not explained or hinted at what that was, except in very simplistic terms, as if it was something we were already supposed to know. But let's actually talk about it. We're reintroduced to Barbie, that woman from the Doll's House who lived in the boarding house. We saw during that whole dream vortex thing that in her dreams, she was a magical princess or the like, helping fantastical creatures trying to stop a monster called the Cuckoo. But everything went to hell when Rose broke down the barriers. She's divorced Ken, moved to New York, and is not doing great. No longer able to dream, but her best friend Wanda, a trans woman who lives in the same apartment complex as her, tries to cheer her up after a restless sleep. Like in the Doll's House, we're introduced to the other tenants. A woman named Thessaly, who will be playing a big part here and in stories to come, lesbian couple Hazel and Foxglove, and a grouchy guy named George. Also, Barbie likes to paint her face and makeup a lot, putting a chessboard on one half of it. This is a weird new entry in the Crow franchise. In the dreaming, Morpheus senses that something is crossing from one realm of existence to another, that one of the scaries, or distant islets in the dreaming, is beginning to die. Despite Morpheus saying it's all very interesting, he also tells Matthew he's not going to do anything about it. They live, they die, they come and go. why should I do anything about it? Because the best stories in the Sandman are the ones where you're proactive, doing things, providing interesting commentary about the nature of existence on mortals or stuff like that, and the worst ones are the ones where you utterly do not give a crap or are barely a cameo in your own series. Wanda takes Barbie out for coffee and food, where Barbie explains how she hasn't dreamed in 2 years, that she used to dream of being part of a mystical land and all that. During this, Wanda also mentions Bizarro World, like the Bizarro stuff in Superman mythos, but as part of a comic within the comic called Hyperman, except all of that is canon in the DC universe, which Sandman is technically part of, but she calls the Bizarro stuff Weirdzo. And fair enough, it was just like, didn't want to draw attention to any of that continuity stuff and want to just make it a goofy reference. Except then on the next page, she refers to it as Bizarro, so was that like originally a Bizarro reference and they had to edit it but missed those last 2 lines? It's just weird. Point is, while Wanda discusses how her family sucks and prays for her to repent her wicked ways, one of the fantasy creatures from Barbie's dreams shows up in the street, killed by police officers as it and her recognize each other. It gives her a gemstone, the Porpentine, and tells her she needs to go back to the mystical land, called just the Land, or the Cuckoo will destroy them all. Wanda takes a very traumatized Barbie home and she starts remembering everything, though is confused because it's only supposed to be a dream. She even summons up a bunch of weird dream birds that then disappear, save for one that gets swallowed up by George from her building. Dude! Show some restraint! That could have lasted you like 3 whole meals! Also, he has a poster of Barbie on his wall because he's a creepy weirdo, declaring that the children of the Cuckoo know her, leading us into issue 33. After learning that Hazel is potentially pregnant from an affair she had with a waiter a few weeks ago, Barbie drifts off to sleep and finally finds herself back in the land. The other tenants of the building fall asleep and George opens up his stomach to reveal a whole bunch of birds that are sent out to each of the people there, instilling weird nightmares, except for Thessaly, who awakens and grabs the bird. She kills it, burns it, and then goes down to have a talk with George. With a knife. Oh, and it turns out that Foxglove was the estranged girlfriend of Judy, one of the diner patrons in 24 Hours who got killed by Dr. Destiny. You know, with how expansive and big and full of huge lands and domains and regions the Sandman universe is, it's a really small world, isn't it? Barbie, meanwhile, meets up with some of the anthropomorphic animal creatures of the land and learns that to defeat the Cuckoo, they need to reach the brightly shining sea, and it's a long way, so they get started and we head into issue 34. The nightmare birds poof out of existence, Hazel and Foxglove shaken by them, but are soon met by Thessaly, who brings Wanda along to check on Barbie. They find her unconscious and holding the stone, unable to be awoken. Under Thessaly's instruction, they take her to George's room, where they find George dead in a bathtub with a knife in him. The others want to call the cops, but Thessaly makes it clear they're not doing anything she doesn't want them to. She's a witch. She cuts off George's face and nails it to a wall, using her powers to summon his soul and get some answers. George was indeed the servant of the Cuckoo, communicating with him for years in his dreams and promising him Barbie if he did as ordered. The birds were meant to consume them through their nightmares. For some reason, George wasn't able to do it himself. He doesn't know what the Cuckoo is exactly, only that it can be found in Barbie's dream. The others are willing to come to Barbie's aid, and Thessaly knows only 2 ways to enter said dream, either via Morpheus or through a magic spell that requires menstrual blood. She calls it the Moon's Road. She says Morpheus won't give a damn about them, either mortal women or her kind, so they go the moon route, inadvertently revealing Hazel's pregnancy to Foxglove. But in any case, they summon the moon, who it turns out is pissed off for being summoned, part of some compact they had made with her kind hundreds of years ago. However, the compact also binds the moon to obey her commands. And you know how I always complain about the moon being too huge sometimes in comics for artistic effect? Well, the moon is in the living room here, and that seems a bit small for the moon. Wanda is ordered to stay behind to guard Barbie's body just in case the Cuckoo sends any other agents, while Thessaly, Hazel, and Foxglove head into Barbie's dreams, bringing us to issue 35. Barbie and her entourage travel across the snowy wastes on their way to the shore, discovering a dead body clutching a scroll for her, an old ally of hers that she recalls. While taking some shelter, she reads the scroll, which has photos of her and her painted face. She explains that she didn't want anything as permanent as a tattoo, but the face painting allowed her to be a different person every day, and that day you felt like being a chessboard. Go figure. The scroll is the weird thing, though. It's a dry, encyclopedic description of a European cuckoo bird and its habit of placing its eggs in the nests of other birds to be raised and can influence a mother bird via a commanding, hypnotic voice. It's all set up for our kinda sorta villain of the story. Morpheus, meanwhile, is informed of which Scary it is that's dying by Lucian, the Dream Lord, thinking that he thought it had collapsed a long while ago, so now, yet again, he needs to wait and see what happens. Nuala admits that while under his command to watch over Barbie, he actually warned her about it, but Morpheus says she did the right thing. Well, enough of checking in with the actual main character of this book, and it having no impact on anything, let's get back to Barbie's Dreamhouse adventures. They've somehow made it to the forest, and we learned the land existed from long before Barbie arrived there. One of their number is killed by the inhabitants of the forest, but they find a safe path and reach a city. Another of their number going down to try to find help, but falls under the control of the cuckoo, Barbie getting captured and taken to the cuckoo's citadel, which is just her house from when she was young. Back in the waking world, it turns out the moon is transphobic, and that's why Wanda couldn't come along. And we'll see why that's especially bullcrap near the end, by the moon's choice and not anything else. But George's face informs her that they literally summoned the moon into the living room, which affected the tides. And that means a hurricane that was going to miss New York is now on its way. But if that's the case and the moon was literally in the living room, why doesn't gravity or any other scientific detail affect it? Why does magic only affect shrinking the moon and putting it in a small space, but not the effects of it going away for a few minutes? The cuckoo is revealed to sort of be a child version of Barbie. It explains that Barbie just had a dull, uninteresting life as a child and made up a fantasy land populated by her toys. What the cuckoo is exactly is not really clear. She says she's Barbie's imaginary friend, but she also talks about how what she's doing is a little like possession, taking her over through her dreams and that she wants a chance to live, using her hypnotic voice to take control of Barbie and force her to consent to being destroyed so she can live. Meanwhile, Thessaly, Hazel, and Foxglove travel the moon path to the dreaming, where identity apparently blurs and all three are kind of intermingling mentally. In the pale light of the moon, I play the game of you. Whoever I am, whoever you are. And that's our title drop! And I guess the storyline is about identity and how we see and define ourselves, but I don't know. It feels like it has a lot of ideas, but they're kind of half-baked. Like, I don't know why this isn't working for me when other storylines have worked fine. I was gonna say it's because we don't really know much about the principal characters, but we actually learned quite a bit about them. And again, that whole identity thing. It's part and parcel with Wanda as a trans woman, Barbie liking to redefine herself through the face paint, Thessaly putting on an image of being boring and bookish while ready to casually inflict violence to defend herself and invoke very powerful, dangerous magics. Hazel and Foxglove have their own identity issues. As lesbians, as former lovers to others, as new potential parents. I get why the story connects with people, but it just does not click with me. I was thinking maybe, as I said, the problem is it needed more time to fully explore its ideas, but I don't know. I'm not really vibing with it already, and it's 6 issues. I almost feel like more time would just stretch the thin plot even thinner and just be boring. I do know the land is half-baked, relying on a lot of very basic fantasy tropes and imagery without much exploration of how it all works. Barbie at one point in the forest invoked the Hobbit with how it felt, and it really just reminded me of how much world-building Tolkien put into the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, while this fantasy realm just feels trite and basic. And it really does not help that the Sandman, the character I am reading this book for, is barely in it! The three arrive and begin hunting for the cuckoo. Hazel and Foxglove sort of make up for the whole Hazel cheating on her thing and plan to have the baby together. In the real world, Wanda goes out into the streets to rescue an old homeless woman in the storm and bring her inside. It's kind of character development. Wanda had brushed her off earlier when she was begging for money and just had been, "New York is full of crazies, gotta develop a thick skin here," but now she's risking herself to help her. Thessaly and the others arrive at where the cuckoo plans to complete a ritual to escape the dreaming, but the cuckoo tricks Thessaly into killing the wrong person so she can use her hypnotic voice to control them. Bang up rescue, ladies! We're gonna call you the Dream Team from now on. In the land, Barbie destroys the jewel, and the storm gets worse in the real world. The stars fall out of the sky in the dreaming, and Morpheus finally shows up in the plot, and the cuckoo has no idea who the hell he is. He frees the others from the cuckoo's mind control and says it's time now for him to absorb the land back into himself. And he does so. All the creatures in it come marching in and get absorbed by him. including creatures Barbie had never dreamt up because, as said, the land was there longer than she was. And at the end, there's a woman named Alienora, who apparently was the one that Morpheus made a compact with long ago to create the land, and then she disappears. We get nothing. No explanations, no story, no exposition about what the hell all that was or who she is. So even in a storyline which had other characters as the protagonists in place of him, they're not even the main characters because so much of this is stuff that has nothing to do with them. Thessaly explains that she actually met Morpheus a long time ago and she's still after her revenge on the Cuckoo for the attempt on her life. But Morpheus isn't interested since the three of them are trespassers on his domain. And her little moon summoning spell has caused a lot of problems. And we see that in action as the hurricane hits the apartment building. Back with Morpheus, one really frustrating part of reading this all back to back is that he seems to keep flip-flopping on how much of a dick he is to mortals. As Hazel keeps pointing out, they didn't know they'd be trespassing, they were just trying to help a friend, but Morpheus is just all, I don't care, you suck. He says that he created the land as part of a compact with that Alienora woman. Well, he doesn't say her name specifically, but that's the actual explanation. But she died before it was fulfilled. As such, since Barbie ended the compact, she's granted a boon. Whatever she wants. Barbie thinks the Cuckoo is dangerous and evil, but Morpheus just says she's acting according to her own nature. Is that evil? Yes. Something's nature can still be evil. You literally had demons at your palace last time, and they're evil by their nature too. Morpheus says that it's Barbie's and Rose Walker's fault that the Cuckoo is trapped like she is, but he doesn't really explain what's meant by that. Like, when Rose briefly shattered the barriers between their dreams, it somehow trapped her there? Why? Especially when Morpheus was supposed to have fixed that. And if he didn't, why didn't he? This is a pretty big oversight on his part considering the damage here. Anyway, the boon can be anything she wants, including killing the Cuckoo or restoring the land and everyone killed, but Barbie elects to have them all sent back home safely, allowing the Cuckoo to leave peacefully too. They're all sent back to the waking world alive and safe, but the same can't be said for Wanda and the homeless woman, who were killed in the rubble. Most of the remaining issue is the really frustrating part. Barbie goes to Wanda's funeral, hosted by her awful transphobic family who cut her hair, dress her in men's clothes, and only refer to her by her dead name and put said dead name on her tombstone. Dora, Wanda's aunt, who is supposedly the only halfway decent one who would still talk to her, is just as awful and judgmental and a piece of crap. It's a really sad, tragic, and frankly unnecessarily downbeat ending to a story that already wasn't exactly full of laughs and joy. And admittedly, this was 1992. Having a story with a trans woman played sympathetically and awesome and brave and pushing back and saying that she is a woman was powerful and important to have at that time in a popular series. But it still feels really crappy that she had to be killed off to provide some pathos for Barbie, who already had more than enough as it was. Still, Barbie is a good friend, so after the awful funeral, in an act of defiance and friendship to Wanda, uses her friend's favorite lipstick to write her real name on the tombstone. On the bus back home, Barbie dreams of Wanda, who now looks as she wanted to, and waves goodbye to Barbie as she's taken away by death. So hey, it's not totally without joy and recognition of who she is, despite what the Moon or a bunch of bigots say. It's just it still required Wanda dying to achieve that effect. And if there's a moral there, I don't know what it is, save maybe that we should take our goodbyes whenever we can. I thought the moral of the story was, don't summon the moon to your living room. So, yeah, that's really all I have to say about A Game of You. I just don't really like it, though of course I don't begrudge anyone who gets a lot out of it. For me, it's just kind of confusing, unfinished, and not really what I want to have out of this series. Still, we must move on, so let's go to issue number 38. The last few we'll be talking about are once again standalone stories, beginning with The Hunt. It's okay, basically a fairy tale being told by a grandfather to his disinterested granddaughter who keeps critiquing aspects of it. So, you know, me, but a teenage girl. Vasily, a young werewolf, in the style of older werewolf tales where it was less a wolf man and more a person who literally becomes a wolf, leaves home with a sack of trinkets taken from a dead peddler on a quest to find a woman whose picture is on a locket. Said woman is apparently the Duke's daughter, and along the way, he encounters another tribe of werewolves, including a woman who manages to catch a deer before he can, and Baba Yaga, who takes him to the Duke's house to see the daughter. Along the way, he keeps encountering Lucien. It seems that among the peddler's trinkets is a book that got lost from his library, and he wants it back, offering to trade, But Vasily is only interested in the daughter, so he can offer nothing. Vasily is tricked into getting locked in a dungeon, and eventually, starving and dying, is rescued by Lucien, who finally agrees to take Vasily to the daughter via dreams. This attracts Morpheus' attention, and Lucien has to admit to the lost book issue, but he's amenable to Vasily's wishes, taking her to the sleeping woman.
Is this a kissing book?
No, because while he finds her beautiful, he just came to return the locket to her. Instead, he decided to hook up with the werewolf lady. The granddaughter takes the story to be an attempt at criticizing her choice of boyfriend, but he denies that, instead simply implying that he was Vasily and this was his story. I think the Princess Bride comparison is apt, and this story would have been greatly improved by the presence of Andre the Giant. Issue 39 is Soft Places, about a teenage Marco Polo lost in the desert encountering Gilbert and Rusticello da Pisa. They're in what Gilbert describes as a soft place, an area of the world where the border between dreams and reality is eroded or hasn't formed yet. Time is meaningless, hence why Marco can meet his future fellow biographer, and Gilbert, who's several hundred years out from them. Eventually, he meets Morpheus, just recently having escaped from Burgess, and gives him some much-needed water. At first, Morpheus doesn't know if he can help Marco return to the real world and his father, with as weak as he is, but after hearing him plead that he doesn't want to be trapped somewhere forever, he does what he can. It is very weak, in my opinion. It's not bad, but I at least could see some value and themes in A Game of You, even if I don't think they were well executed. Soft Places just feels like nothing other than Gilbert complaining that soft places are few in number because people explored most of the world and that somehow made them disappear. We'll end today's episode with The Parliament of Rooks, returning to Lita and her son Daniel. While Lita talks with a friend on the phone about the difficulties of being a single mother, Daniel naps and enters the dreaming. There he meets Eve, Matthew, a gargoyle named Gregory, and they all attend a little tea party that Abel is hosting in the House of Secrets. We learn from Matthew that apparently Morpheus has hooked up with some woman and is spending all his time with her, though we don't learn who she is. Sorta. We'll be getting into that more next time. In the meantime, Daniel's hanging out with 3 horror hosts and storytellers, so they tell some stories. Kane comes in, and his story is first, where the issue gets its name and provides a mystery. Birds known as rooks will often gather together in a field and have a single one of their number caught the rest for hours, hence Parliament of Rooks. One of 2 things will happen. The bird will eventually leave, or the rook cawing at them will be pecked to death by the rest. Either way, a more productive congressional session than human ones. Why they do this is the mystery. Eve tells the story of how, depending on your folklore, the biblical Adam had as many as 3 different wives. The first was Lilith, who was basically a clone of Adam and insisted to be in a position of equality with him, which apparently was too much, and she was expelled from Eden, in turn going off and getting together with demons. The second wife was formed from nothing and never had a name, every part of her being grown right in front of Adam, starting with bone and ending on skin and hair. But he rejected her because he watched the whole growing process and found her icky. Adam is kind of a douche. What happened to her is up for debate, some saying she left the garden while others say God destroyed her. And then came the final wife, Eve, made from his rib or his side depending on the translation. And we all know how that story went. That's right. Adam and Eve starting a fashion trend with fig leaves. And finally Abel, who tells a story about chibi versions of Death and Morpheus coming to chibi Cain and Abel, with Cain having just killed Abel, Death wants to take him, but Morpheus offers him the chance to come play in his garden and get a job telling secret stories. But he was lonely, so later Morpheus recruited Cain to come join him, and they lived happily ever after. Cain is annoyed by this and orders them all to leave, but on the way out, Abel reveals the answer to the Parliament of Rooks. It's not a meeting or anything. The lone rook in it is a storyteller, and they let the one rook live if they like the story. Cain kills him for revealing the answer because he's kind of a one-trick pony. And thus Daniel wakes up from his nap in time for Lita to get him dinner. A much cuter ending than last time. And there's still so much more to tell. We're past the halfway point of the Sandman, but there's still a lot to go over. Come back next time as we begin the search for the 7th Endless, an unusual tie-in to an event comic, and the beginning of the end for the Lord of Dreams.
That comic books are for
So here we are, all three of us, just like the old days. And we've even got an audience. Let's tell stories. Unfortunately, Kane tried to tell the story of Marvel, and everyone murdered him for a change. Hello, my friends. Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications on new video releases. If you'd like to support future videos, you can check out my Patreon or purchase a t-shirt via Teespring or Shark Robot. Thanks for watching!